The sun rose lazily over Lake Serenity, painting the water in gold and soft hues of pink. The surface was perfectly still, like a giant mirror reflecting the towering pine trees that lined the shore. This lake wasn't just a beautiful view, it was mine. Every single inch of it, along with the docks, the boathouses, and the access roads that wound their way around the water. I leaned against the railing of my deck, sipping my coffee and enjoying the quiet hum of nature. The neighborhood beyond the trees was waking up. I could hear the faint sound of dogs barking and lawnmowers starting. I'd been living here for 6 months, ever since I'd moved into my grandfather's old property. My grandfather, Harold Hayes, had been one of the most respected men in the county, and one of the shrewdest. He had built the lake decades ago, damming a section of the river and purchasing all the surrounding land. Over time, he leased pieces of the land to developers, letting them build the quaint suburban community that now lined the lake. What most of them didn't know, or didn't care to check, was that Harold had never sold the lake itself. The land under the water, the docks, the roads leading to the water. All still privately owned. And now, they were mine. I'd been keeping a low profile, not out of necessity but out of preference. I liked my peace and quiet. But that was all about to change on one bright, cloudless morning. I was on the dock, cleaning the polished chrome rails of Serena, my 30-foot yacht. She gleamed in the morning light, a mix of blue and white that contrasted beautifully with the emerald green water beneath her hull. It was therapeutic work, quiet, peaceful, until I heard the unmistakable click-click-click of high heels on wood. Even before I looked up, I knew who it was. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, shrill, and full of manufactured authority. Karen. Every neighborhood had one, the self-proclaimed queen bee, drunk on the small power the HOA granted her. She strutted down the dock with a clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, and a floppy sun hat that looked like it belonged in a bad reality TV show. "Yes," I said, not looking up as I buffed a spot on the rail. She stopped beside the boat, looked it up and down with a disapproving sneer, and then jabbed her pen toward it. "This thing is a violation. HOA guidelines clearly state that no watercraft over 20 feet is allowed to dock here. You need to move it immediately or face a $500 fine for every day it stays in violation." I slowly turned toward her, raising an eyebrow. "A violation? That's right," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is a community dock, and the HOA enforces rules for the good of everyone. You can't just park your yacht here like you own the place." The irony of that statement almost made me laugh out loud. Instead, I leaned against the polished railing and gave her the calmest smile I could manage. "Is that so?" I said evenly. "Yes, that's so," she snapped, clearly mistaking my calm for intimidation. "I'll be generous and give you until tomorrow afternoon to have it removed. After that, we'll arrange to have it towed. And you'll be billed, of course." By now, a few neighbors had emerged from their houses, lingering along the edge of the docks or pretending to check their mail. Everyone knew Karen loved confrontation, and they were eager for their morning entertainment. I set down the polishing cloth, stood upright, and crossed my arms casually. "Karen," I said slowly, "this isn't a community dock." She blinked, confused for half a second before regaining her composure. "Of course, it is. This entire lake is HOA property. It says so in the handbook. You can't just—" I cut her off with a chuckle. "No, you're mistaken. This lake, this dock, the land it sits on, it's all private property. My private property. You've been using it under a lease my grandfather signed with the HOA almost 20 years ago." Her jaw actually dropped. That's ridiculous. "The HOA owns nothing but paper rules and an inflated sense of authority," I interrupted, pulling my phone from my pocket. A few swipes brought up the county property records, complete with my name listed as the legal owner. I turned the screen toward her. "See for yourself. Deed, taxes, everything. You're welcome to confirm it at the county clerk's office if you think I forged government records." Her face turned an alarming shade of pink. The whispers from the neighbors grew louder, a mix of surprise and barely concealed amusement. "You," she sputtered, searching for words. "You can't just—" "Can't what?" I tilted my head slightly. "Own my own property. Dock my own boat on my own dock. Karen, you're trespassing right now. Technically, I could call the sheriff and have you removed." That shut her up. For a long moment, she just stood there, glaring at me like she was trying to will me into submission. When that didn't work, she spun on her heel, her heels clacking angrily on the wood as she stormed back up the dock toward the parking lot. "I'll be speaking with the board," she snapped over her shoulder. "Don't think this is over." I watched her retreating figure, biting back another laugh. "Looking forward to it," I called after her, my tone dripping with amusement. As I turned back to the boat, one of the older neighbors, Tom, ambled over from the next slip. He was a retired mechanic, his baseball cap frayed around the edges, and a perpetual grin on his face. "Been waiting for someone to put her in her place," he said, chuckling. Didn't know you were the guy who owned the lake, though. Guess that explains why you don't take her nonsense. I shrugged, smirking. I like my peace and quiet. Figured there was no need to stir the pot. Tom laughed again. Oh, buddy, you just tipped the whole pot over. This is gonna be the talk of the neighborhood for weeks. As the crowd dispersed, I returned to my boat, but my peaceful morning was gone. I knew Karen, she wasn't the type to back down gracefully. No, she'd double down, rally the board, maybe even try to dig up some kind of loophole to challenge me. But here's the thing, you don't inherit an empire from a man like Harold Hayes without learning how to play the game. And if Karen thought a clipboard and a few HOA bylaws could scare me off my own property, she was in for a rude awakening. The lake shimmered under the morning sun as I finished polishing Serena, a calm stillness over the water. It was my lake, my rules, and by the time this was over, Karen and her HOA were going to understand that in no uncertain terms. The next morning, the lake was unusually quiet. No kids laughing from the docks, no early morning fishermen tossing their lines in the shallows, just a strange, tense silence that settled over the water like a fog. I knew why. Karen wasn't the type to lick her wounds and walk away. She'd probably spent the night crafting some grand plan to assert her so-called authority, and sure enough, by noon, I saw her bright red SUV pull into the parking lot near the main dock. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 other board members followed her out of the car, a tall, balding man in khaki shorts who always looked like he was late for a golf game, and a younger woman with a permanent scowl etched on her face. All 3 of them were armed with clipboards, manila folders, and the kind of smug confidence you only see in people who think they hold all the cards. I didn't even bother to get up from my chair. I was sitting on the porch overlooking the water, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand as I watched them march toward my dock like an angry parade. Karen stopped at the end of the wooden planks, her sunglasses reflecting the glint of the midday sun. We've discussed your situation, she announced, her tone sharp and authoritative, and the HOA board has unanimously voted that your oversized vessel must be removed immediately. You are in violation of Article 7, Section C of the Community Watercraft Code. Failure to comply will result in fines, legal action, and possible foreclosure on your property. I almost choked on my tea, not from fear but from trying to hold back a laugh. Foreclosure, I echoed, standing slowly. On what grounds, exactly? You are in violation, the balding man cut in, his voice clipped. These docks are for community use only. You can't monopolize space with a commercial-sized yacht. This is a family-friendly neighborhood. I walked down to the dock slowly, letting my calmness needle them. When I reached the edge, I tapped my phone and pulled up a PDF. Funny thing, I said, flipping the screen toward them. This is the original lease agreement between my grandfather and your precious HOA. It very clearly states that the association is leasing access to the docks and lake. Access, not ownership. You're standing on my dock, using my lake, and you've been doing it for decades because my grandfather allowed it. But let me make something clear, this arrangement is a courtesy, not a right. The younger woman frowned. That's absurd. Everyone knows the lake is community property. Everyone, I said with a smirk, needs to read their contracts more carefully. The county records, the tax office, even the title company will all tell you the same thing. I own this lake, and every dock attached to it. Every inch of water you've been using without giving me so much as a thank you. For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence, broken only by the gentle lap of water against the dock posts. Then Karen tried again, her voice cracking just slightly under the weight of reality. You can't just throw decades of community guidelines out the window. People rely on this lake, the fishing, the boating, the swimming. You can't just take that away. I crossed my arms, staring her down. Can't I? The only reason you're still allowed to use this lake is because I haven't revoked the lease agreement. But keep pushing, Karen, and we'll see how fast I drain every privilege your little HOA thinks it owns. You've already burned through your goodwill with yesterday's stunt. You want to keep enjoying my water. Then maybe learn some manners. The balding man turned red. You wouldn't dare. I cut him off with a sharp laugh. Try me. From the corner of my eye, I noticed movement, neighbors gathering on their decks, some with their phones out, others just watching the spectacle with thinly veiled amusement. I could practically feel the shift in the air. The neighborhood was seeing it now, the HOA wasn't in control anymore. Karen tried one last desperate card. We'll sue, she spat. You can't threaten the entire community without consequences. I tilted my head, smiling coldly. Go ahead, call your lawyers. But remember, lawsuits are expensive, and they won't change a thing. This lake is mine, and your contracts prove it. If you think otherwise, file the paperwork. I'll be waiting. Her sunglasses slipped just enough for me to see the flash of panic in her eyes. For someone used to bullying people into submission, standing toe-to-toe with someone who wouldn't budge was a shock she clearly hadn't anticipated. Without another word, she spun around, motioning for her two cronies to follow her. They stormed back to their SUV, their anger practically radiating off them as the neighbors began whispering louder, some even clapping softly. I turned back toward my house, a smirk on my face. That night, I sat out on my porch again, the lake calm under the moonlight. Tom, the old mechanic, wandered over with a beer in hand and plopped down in the chair next to me. "You sure know how to stir up a hornet's nest," he said with a chuckle. "Didn't plan to," I admitted, sipping my drink. "But I'm not letting 'em walk over me. Not here." Tom nodded slowly, his gaze drifting over the water. "They're in for a rude awakening. Folks around here have gotten used to thinking the HOA runs everything. Guess they forgot what happens when someone finally pushes back." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the reflection of the moon on my lake. "They'll remember soon enough." The following morning, I drafted an official letter to the HOA, outlining the terms of their continued access, respect, courtesy, and zero harassment. Any violation, I warned, would result in immediate revocation of access to the docks and lake. I sent copies to every homeowner in the community, making sure they all knew exactly where they stood. By evening, my phone was flooded with messages, some angry, some apologetic, but most of them supportive. People were tired of Karen's power trips. They were tired of being fined for minor infractions, of being bullied into submission. And just like that, the balance shifted. Karen avoided me for weeks after that. The board tried to puff their chests a few more times, sending passive-aggressive notices about unapproved activities, but they never set foot on my dock again. Slowly, the community began to realize what I already knew. Without my permission, the lake they loved was just a pretty view. One evening, as I stood on the dock with the sun setting behind the trees, I smiled to myself. The water was calm, the air was peaceful, and the world felt just a little bit quieter. It wasn't about power. It was about respect, and finally, after years of letting the HOA believe they ruled the lake, they knew exactly who held the real authority.